call the East Bethel EDA meeting of December 16th to order. First item, before we adopt the agenda, we need to change the agenda to edit it to make an approval for these new draft minutes from May 20th, as you have before you. So if you've had a chance to read through it, I would take a motion to approve the minutes in front of us.
I'd offer one correction.
Yes.
8.0, Urkel moved, and I think I was the one that probably seconded.
Okay.
Matt wouldn't. I don't think you
wouldn't have been me.
No,
No,
that's a great point.
Yep.
Any other changes? Tom, have you had a chance to?
I think really only if you want to elaborate on the discussion that we had regarding the levy, we had a discussion how it pertains to the city administrator's salary and how that is worked out in the city's budget. But that was part of the discussion, and we need to elaborate on that. I just remember us discussing that.
So you don't want any change? So you
We don't need to make any changes,
okay.
no.
Got it, okay. So any other comments or changes? Can't see any. If not, then we want to make a motion with
I'd move
that.
for approval as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have adopted our agenda. Item number 3, Midco.
Yeah, and then Madam Chair, if you can just adopt the minutes then.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
with those
skipped that.
changes, and
Yes.
then that'll be for the record.
Yes. So we'll adopt the amended minutes. I'll take a motion.
Again, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. We've adopted the minutes and the agenda. All right.
Okay, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I wanted to give everyone just an update on the Midco broadband grant agreement. The City Council on December 9th approved the acceptance of the grant from Anoka County. Initially, it was set up where Anoka County was going to do a RFP with providers, in this case Midco for this area, and then that changed to a grant process with the provider, and then they decided they don't want to do that either. So we had a little sit down and chatted with Anoka County and said, look, why don't you grant the dollars to the city, we'll take it from here and work with our providers. And so Midco had submitted an application for dollars as indicated for the grant and the RFP that included the city of East Bethel, city of Bethel, and the township of Linwood. So it was a 3-part kind of project. And so the county then agreed to the fact that they would grant the money to a city, not all 3 cities, but that one city would need to have to take the reins on kind of project management and follow through and making sure it was all done with a joint powers agreement with the other 2 cities. And that's precisely what happened. We accepted those grants here on the 9th. And then that's gone through with the county. Those are ARPA dollars. And then on the 23rd, the City Council is going to be approving or reviewing to approve the joint powers agreement and the cost share agreement with Midco. Now, the cost share agreement is essentially $1,019,800 from Anoka County, and they're matching those dollars with $600-some thousand. So essentially, the 3 communities are receiving $1.6 million for broadband expansion. And I have, right here is the map. This is Bethel up in here. And the red dots are the connection points for the new broadband expansion. And so you see Linwood gets a fair amount, East Bethel gets a fair amount, Bethel has a lesser amount because they're a smaller city. But there is a significant amount of connections that are happening in red here, is the connections for the city of East Bethel and Cedar. And you'll see that there's a fair number of addresses there that that had service that was inadequate, you might say. No high-speed internet at that point. And the number one question we get, I think, from a lot of developers is, what type of connectivity do we have in that area? Because that's what their customers are asking for. So we consider this to be a win with the use of ARPA dollars. As you know, ARPA dollars coming from the federal government are flexible. You can use them for just about anything that falls within those categories. And the fact that Anoka County was able to work out a project here for that will directly benefit the citizens of East Bethel, I think is a win for all the residents here. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. The dollars have to be accepted by the end of this year, which they were already, and then the project has to be completed by the end of '26. And so Midco is fairly confident that's well within the range of being able to do that. And quite honestly, the amount of coverage that is happening for $1.6 million, I'm impressed with. I mean, to lay broadband in the ground is not inexpensive. And the fact that they can connect these many people, not only in East Bethel, but everywhere else as well, I think is outstanding. And the other two communities, Bethel and Linwood, have been great to work with. They're excited about this as well, and I think that they're able to tell a good story on that side as well. So just wanted to give you a quick update on that. If there's any questions on that, here's the broadband grant accepting those dollars.
So does Midco have a map of the expansion areas that they'll be serving? Was that the map that you,
Right here.
you
Yep.
showed? Okay.
Yeah. So with this work that's going to be done, I think
Okay.
I think the majority of East Bethel is covered. There's probably still some spots that are underserved, but a lot of those spots have wetlands and things that are natural areas that are difficult to get through,
Right.
and would be difficult to service those areas, at least feasibly service those areas. But it's certainly, I think, kind of covering an area that's been long asking for these type of improvements, but again, the cost to do so is enormous, and we're very thankful for Midco's participation in the project cost on this. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
It's good news.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the update on that. Moving to item 4, if you'd like.
Yes, item
Okay.
4.
We have some guests with us here this evening from the Met Council, and I want to just kind of set it up here. Last year we went before the legislature on a project where on Sims and 65, the schools that are, the two elementary schools that are in there, East Bethel Elementary and Cedar Creek Elementary, are both have failing septic systems, and their wells are pumping water that is questionable at this point. There was a story that was told of someone that came in, and they went into the lunchroom and they saw a container of water, and they said, "Oh, it's nice that they give lemonade to the kids." And they said, "Well, that's not lemonade. That's well water." So the color and everything was just not good. And so we met with the school district. They are very interested in hooking up to city water and sewer service. We, of course, don't have water service there, and sewer goes by on 65, but it isn't connected to them. So we started out with the help of Representative Peggy Scott and Senator Cal Barr in putting a bill together last legislative session, in which we were asking for $10.5 million. We would put a well and a water tower and a treatment plant kind of by the post office area. The city owns some land right there. And then connect the two schools up. And as we're going past the schools on Sims, that's right there going south on 65 is the new industrial park that was just recently rezoned. And so that'll eventually then hook that up to city water and sewer service as well. And I just got off the phone with somebody today that said that if the land's worth $10,000 an acre today, if water and sewer is there, it's worth $50,000 overnight an acre. So people recognize that the value goes up significantly, and a lot of places won't even consider moving in unless there's those type of services. So I think from an economic development standpoint, this is the catalyst, you might say, to develop that area with higher density commercial industrial development than would otherwise potentially go in there. But then I was down meeting with the Met Council. We were talking a little bit about the reserve capacity loan that we have. We were talking about the bonding request that was last year that we're hoping to get back on the table this year. And what came up with was this discussion of a resource recovery in terms of heat that comes off of the plant, down the Met Council plant, and what can be done with that heat. And so that kind of started the genesis of this conversation of we need a little more information. You know, can you come in and maybe give us a presentation a little bit on what the best management practice is for this type of recovery, and I can turn it over to them if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Top here.
Thank you for that introduction and a little bit of background as to the reason why we're here presenting to you tonight. First of all, my name is Kyle Colvin. I'm the manager of the Wastewater Planning and Community Programs Group. Also here in the audience with me tonight is John Klebeck. He's the assistant manager of that same group, Wastewater Planning and Community Programs. And then we have Jennifer Kostrowski, who is the assistant manager for Policy and Planning. So we're all available here to answer questions if there's something I can't answer. Both John and Jennifer have worked on specifically a grant that the council worked on with District Energy for thermal recovery project that we didn't get the grant funding, but we learned a lot and spent a lot of time filling out that grant application. So we're all here to answer any questions that you might have. So just a summary here of, see if I can advance this. It's not responsive.
Not working.
Yeah, it's not advancing the slides. Might have fell asleep on me. There we go. All right, so just an overview of what I'll be covering here with you tonight. I'll be providing just a broad overview of the regional wastewater system, kind of who the council is, what we do, what assets we have. Also go into a little bit about the development guide that we are currently in the process of trying to wrap up. Touch on a little bit of the water policy plan, which is a chapter of that development guide. It does include some goals and objectives in terms of sustainability, which does include wastewater reuse, the water itself, as well as energy conservation and other projects that we've been looking at to move progress in those areas. Also, we went through a process, entertained a request in 2014, I believe it was, where we had Greenleaf companies come in. They were proposing a project down by the Huntington Bank Stadium, the Gophers football stadium. So there's some things that we discovered during that process of trying to determine what could be done for thermal recovery and what obstacles from a regulatory standpoint such an operation did pose as a challenge to us. Also, we do have one existing thermal recovery project in one of our treatment facilities, so I'll just briefly go over that. And then also, I went back and took a look at the regional system that exists in East Bethel and provided some very high-level things that would need to be considered in terms of where this thermal energy capture could occur within the regional system, both whether this is located at our treatment facility down on Viking Drive or further to the north. We've got 2 land application basins, and there is a point in the line where it makes more sense where energy capture would or could be accomplished along Highway 65. And then also, just kind of wrap up, we did go through and update our regional policy, water policy, last go around in 2018 to specifically address the limits of regional involvement tied to rate increases. That policy was guided through input from a task force of community customers. And even though that was specific to water reuse, the actual reuse of the wastewater itself, I think the premise of the level of the limit of regional investment would also still apply on anything that would pertain to thermal recovery as well. So that's what I plan to talk about. Metropolitan Council, we're the regional wastewater service provider in the 7-county area. We provide service to 111 customers. That's a wholesale service. Communities then pass our costs down to the individual users within the community. We serve a little over 2.9 million people. It's pretty impressive when you consider that's nearly half of the entire state population of Minnesota. So large service area. We own and operate 9 wastewater treatment plants, the smallest of which is located here in East Bethel. Through the last 12 months, the flow at the East Bethel plant has averaged about 75,000 gallons per day. Our largest plant, of course, is our Metropolitan plant located in downtown St. Paul. That treats on average anywhere from 170 to 180 million gallons per day. So a wide range of assets that we have in our treatment. We've got over 600 miles of pipe that conveys that flow to the 9 plants. Regionally, we treat 250 million gallons per day. Our total current value of our assets is $9 billion. That's not replacement cost. That's just if you just present worth all the investments that we made since 1972. That comes out to about $9 billion. It would cost far greater of an amount, multiple times that, to actually replace that system today. And we have an annual capital program of about $150 million per year. I mentioned that our Imagine 2050, that's the new regional development framework that the council is wrapping up. It does include 4 core values. You can see them there. The core value of stewardship is the area in which climate and adaptation falls under. And with that, that would include opportunities to conserve, efforts to conserve water, conserve energy, build infrastructure that is sustainable from a life cycle, and also from minimizing environmental impact during those activities. And then in the Water Resource Policy Plan, we do have an action plan, which is basically to explore and support community efforts to adapt technologies that increase the efficient use of water and reduce energy consumption. And you can see there that we have a number of activities in our proposed policy plan, which is scheduled for adoption in January? February 12th. So we're coming down the home stretch there, but you can see that there forth from the top, wastewater effluent and stormwater, wastewater, that's water reuse, recovering heat. The second bullet there pertains to recovering heat from plant effluent. As I talk here a little bit, there are two terms that we need to kind of keep in mind. There's the influent flow that comes into the plant. That's the untreated wastewater. And then once it goes through the treatment process, then the water that leaves the plant is effluent. And there are different challenges for extracting heat out of the incoming flow, the influent versus extracting heat in the cleaner water as it exits the plant. And there's also risk associated, different levels of risk associated with each one, and also regulatory requirements related to each one. So I'll be covering those a little more in depth. So again, in response to the 2014 inquiry from Greenleaf companies for the thermal capture, the project was termed sewer thermal energy recovery, or also known as STIR with an E. So if I referred to STIR, it was specific to that project. And that project was proposing to draw or gather the thermal energy out of the interceptor facility that we owned by the Gopher Stadium. So it was an extraction of thermal energy from the raw wastewater itself. And through the review of the potential concepts, we determined or identified that there was two approaches that one could take. One was building heat exchangers for each individual building. This wasn't specific to STIR, but this was basically a model that we were investigating going forward on future projects. And so that first graphic there is this concept of building individual heat extractions or thermal recovery for each individual units. And one of the things that was identified, a challenge, was from a regulatory standpoint, the PCA, which is our regulatory agency that issues our permits, determined that the permits related to the raw wastewater stays with us. So we were obligated or responsible for the safety and health and welfare and the environment for that wastewater, even if it were to leave our facilities and go through a private entity or private partnership heat extraction. So that was a challenge from our standpoint, and in fact, it was determined, or it was conveyed to us by the PCA that those facilities would also have to be permitted and controlled by the council because of that regulatory risk. So because of that, we took a look at looking at heat recovery at our treatment plants themselves. That would be a situation where we're actually controlling the flow from coming from the pipe, going through a heat exchanger, heat recovery facility, and then utilizing that heat for our own purposes to augment electricity and gas heating within the plant. It also can be used to help the treatment process itself by including a temperature that enhances the bacterial process that's involved in the treatment of wastewater service. And then the other opportunity for capturing thermal energy is through the effluent, that part of the pipe that exits the plant. That's cleaner water. The heat exchangers are less susceptible to problems plugging, fouling, when the effluent is the means or the source of the heat capture. And so that has a lower risk. It's already treated to some level. So in terms of pathogens and other detrimental qualities in the effluent, that stuff has been removed. So it's safer from the public health standpoint. I think I covered everything there. Yeah. This is really just a simple diagram that we developed under the STIR project. It basically just shows where the wastewater on the left-hand side on the diagram there, you can see where wastewater is diverted out of our interceptor pipe. This is raw wastewater that was being proposed in STIR. That particular project was proposing to need about 2.6 million gallons per day of wastewater in order to meet the heating needs of the complex. I believe it was one or two 14-story buildings. So to give you kind of a magnitude of scale, two 14-story buildings, they were at the time in 2014 was proposing they would need 2.6 million gallons of flow in order to capture enough heat to make this work. From there, it gets pumped to the heat exchanger, where the heat gets extracted through a closed loop system, which is that blue line. And then that blue line serves as a distribution system. And in some cases around the country, this distribution center, this distribution loop can actually provide opportunities for multiple heat exchange for different buildings. In this particular case, I believe it was just 2 specific buildings, but it does offer another distribution opportunity and source for heat for multiple uses. And then from there, you can see after the heat exchanger, the raw wastewater in this case gets returned back into the sewer outfall. One of the things that we recently discovered with, I believe it was with the district energy project, was in that project where the heat would be extracted at our metropolitan plant in St. Paul, they were proposing to use effluent, and in order to keep the heat exchangers from fouling, they needed to include an additive to keep it from scaling and probably slime will build up and stuff like that. And the material that they were proposing was a sulfate-based material, which we are looking at possible new regulatory requirements for sulfate, so that would be problematic in the usage of that particular material. So, but this in general is kind of a schematic of what we were looking at on the STIR project. This project here was estimated to cost about $14 million, to give you kind of a scale in the cost. That was back in 2018 dollars, so you could probably figure it's well over 20 million in today's dollars. Also, the one thing that that cost in this diagram doesn't really include is the need to pre-treat the wastewater before it goes to the heat exchangers, because the wastewater it contains foreign material that would follow that, so there would have to be at a minimum some kind of a screening in order to get the flow to the point where it wouldn't follow the heat exchangers. So again, when we were looking at the STIR project, we had conversations and communications with our regulator, the PCA. This was a concept that was new to the PCA in 2018, so they themselves had to do some research nationally to see what other agencies what other areas in the country was utilizing this. Again, as I indicated, for an influent, this is an influent heat recovery, they were going to require that the thermal recovery, the heat exchangers, everything in that process would have to be permitted by us. So that prohibited the ability to do a partnership, a private property partnership, where one entity would own part of the equipment, and the council would either just provide the wastewater or provide the mechanism or utilities to get to get the flow to the heat exchangers. So this was a pretty large challenge for us. So it basically would require that the council own and operate everything related to the heat thermal recovery process. Again, I mentioned that the council would be responsible for retaining control and the responsibility of the wastewater at all times throughout the process. And the wastewater, one of the ideas or suggestions was, could the council just simply transfer the permit and the regulatory requirements to a third party, to a private partnership? And the PCA said, basically said no, that the council being the regulatee, that responsibility would have to stay with the council. So the conclusion of that was really from an influent thermal recovery, private partnership wasn't very conducive based on what we were learning and what we were being told by the PCA. However, what we did discover and learn was that the effluent had fewer hurdles. It was cleaner material. The council was still required to deliver the effluent at the level of treatment that was necessary for whatever the intended end use was. And that level is dependent on what that end use is. We had a project when was Intercom, 2014? 17. It was a municipal waste to energy where they was requesting us look at delivering water reuse and with some heat. Well, it was for water reuse, and through that project, we learned that the quality of the wastewater has to meet different levels depending on how that's going to be used. So, for instance, if the water is treated, if the wastewater is treated and released to the river, that has one set of standards. If it's treated to a higher standard, that could be used for industrial use per se. But if it's in a closed loop and the risk of exposing people to that flow is low, then that level of treatment is a little bit higher. And if it's for infiltration, like we have in East Bethel through land application basins, that's even a higher level of treatment. If there's any chance for this flow to be for the public to be exposed to it, that's an even higher level. So, for instance, spray irrigation, because of that, the process of basically making the water an aerosol, the public could breathe it in, so that's even a higher level. And then, of course, you have direct potable reuse, which is the highest level, and that's for direct consumption. So, like I said, this project here really was a learning experience for us that really showed that there are these different levels that need to be met, and even the Department of Health, which governs water quality standards in the PCA, related to and looking at California standards for reuse, because that part of the country is kind of the leader. And so I would say that I would characterize that the learning experience here was both for the council and the PCA in the reuse. But it did, what we did conclude was that there are greater opportunities for effluent reuse, direct reuse, and also for thermal recovery. And so we did in 2004, in order to meet goals on our sustainability objectives in our policy plan, we installed a heat recovery unit on our effluent at our Eagles Point plant. This is a fairly small system. I think we learned that it circulates, I think it's 75 gallons per minute, I believe. It helps augment and heat our administration building. At the time that it was designed and built, we were anticipating being able to provide all of the heat to that building. However, we have subsequently had to add some additional heating in there. So at 75 gallons per minute, it doesn't quite deliver all of the heating needs for the admin building. And I'm not certain what the size of the Eagles Point administration building is, but I would guess it's probably somewhere between 15,000 square feet in size to kind of give you a scale. I can confirm that. To put that in perspective, that was 75 gallons per minute. East Bethel currently, on average, is about 35 gallons per minute throughout the day. There's peaks and lows, but if you take the average, it's about 35 gallons per day. And also, right now, the East Bethel plant, we operate that plant through storing flow in the system and then processing it in slugs. Because the flow is so low right now, the plant doesn't quite operate as efficient, and from a hydraulics standpoint, it doesn't quite. There's not enough flow there in order to flow through the process as it needs to get the treatment that it needs to. So we shut the plant down, or we throttle the flow down to the point, build it up, and then we release it over time. So that 35 gallons per minute there are times during certain parts of the day where that 35 is significantly less than that value. In fact, it might even be close to 0. So that, again, we're currently in the process. The plan was to produce some monitoring equipment to determine what the energy savings are. We have not, I don't know if that has been completed. We're still trying to look to see if that project has been, if the energy savings report has been completed yet. And then getting to just kind of the East Bethel here. This is the diagram. You can see our treatment plant located down there near Viking Drive. If you take just a straight line distance along Highway 65 to where Sims Road is, I believe that's where the industrial complex was being looked at. Yep. The total distance is about 20,000 feet to get from the plant to Sims Road. We've got an interceptor pipe that runs, actually, I'm sorry, the plant is located south of Viking Drive. Our interceptor pipe that collects flow and brings it to the city starts basically in Viking Drive. Then the city has a line that was installed when the Castle Towers facility was phased out. So there is a local sewer that conveys flow south down 65 until it gets to Viking Boulevard where we pick it up. But the point of this map here is that if influent heat thermal recovery was being looked at, and I've already indicated that there's a number of problems associated with that, the distance to get that back up to Sims Road would be about 3 3/4 of a mile. So it is quite a distance. However, if we take a look at capturing thermal energy through the effluent line that comes out of the plant, that pipe, the flow gets pumped north along Highway 65. There's 2 land application basins. That's the lab. There's one, I'm sorry, I don't know what roads those are on, but there's one that's south of Sims Road. It's about a little over 15,500 feet from the plant. And then from that land application basin number 1, it's another 4,400 feet to get to Sims Road. The importance with the location of the land application number 1 is that we currently operate those application basins one at a time, and we switch them off. So we'll operate one for a period of time, shut that one off, and direct the flow to the other one, and give the original one time to rest. So the importance is, in order to get a dedicated source of effluent, the closest or the furthest north along 65 where that thermal energy could be drawn off would be down around that land application basin number 1. Otherwise, if it was north of there would be certain times where flow would not be going through that distribution pipe north of land application 1. So that's consideration if we look, continue to look at thermal capture. The location would have to be somewhere at or south of Lab 1. Any questions on that? Okay. And then I think this is the last slide here. I talked a little bit about the regional benefit and the cost of service. We currently don't have any thermal energy recovery that's implemented through a private partnership. Greenleaf in 2014 was the first corporation or private entity that approached us. Just earlier this year, we did apply for a federal grant to investigate and further the consideration of thermal energy out of our Metro plant for district energy. That was to help augment their operations in downtown St. Paul, which is a waste to energy facility. It provides heat to the downtown St. Paul area. We did take a look at or the water policies, as I indicated, both the current policy, the 2040 water policy plan, and the proposed 2050 does include this limit for regional benefiting investments. That again is the level that's been determined by our customer communities back in 2018 of what the appetite was for rate increases that would help support financial programs to help offset some of the cost for wastewater reuse, the reuse of water itself. That limit does base a rate increase of 0.775% or 0.75% in our rates. In today's dollars, at the rates that we currently have in 2024, if you depreciate out a 20-year loan, that is about a $30 million present value that a 0.75% rate increase would actually generate. And that $30 million would be available for one or multiple projects. I think in concept, I think what we're looking at here for thermal energy, we're probably looking at some kind of a model where where the limit of the council's financial involvement would be tied to some kind of a maximum rate increase. It's not to say that that state funds could be pursued and other sources of revenue to help offset these costs, but from the council's standpoint, we based our level of financial capacity based on the rate. I will say that there have been a number of conversations about that limit, the need and interest for wastewater reuse. We're getting more thermal recovery inquiries, and so I would suggest that it might be a good idea for the council to go back and rethink, reinvestigate what our customer community's appetite would be to renew or revise that limit of involvement, that rate increase. There may be more appetite to raise that higher. And I think that was it. A lot of information in kind of a short period of time. But
I've heard you use the term council.
Metropolitan Council.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to have a clarification that you were talking about Met Council, not
Yes.
East Bethel.
Thank you. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Metropolitan Council.
So, bringing it down to layman's language, so we're in effect talking about creating our own mini district energy, our own mini energy district that would be distributed along those lines. And then to make it cost effective, would there be a minimal percentage of users along the line that would need to hook up?
Yeah, that's a concept that we'd have to talk to the city a little bit further. Like I indicated earlier, this thermal recovery is kind of a new concept, to the council. We haven't entered into any community or private partnerships. So the experience that we learned in talking with Greenleaf was there's a lot of regulatory details that would have to be worked out along with legal details as well. But certainly, if there's a regional, again, the level of involvement for the Metropolitan Council's involvement financially is based on a determined regional benefit, and usually historically that has been on the wastewater side of things. So if there's a project that shows that an investment has a regional wastewater benefit, then that would allow the council to further investigate, partnerships with either communities or private entities. I will say that, the regional wastewater benefit can be broadly interpreted, and one of those interpretations for the wastewater reuse was that if a community was challenged with water supply issues to the point where it could potentially hinder the ability to grow, the council relies on that growth to repay those investments. So one could argue that by offering reclaimed water, that helps offset water appropriations in a community, then a community could continue to grow, and therefore there would be a regional benefit. So the interpretation in terms of regional benefit, I think, is kind of evolving, and we're thinking a little bit out of the box. It might not specifically have to be related to a wastewater benefit, but if some way we can make a tie that indirectly it could be benefiting, that would be something that would allow the council to further entertain ideas.
Thank you for coming tonight. This was very informative. What I kept hearing through the presentation was this requires a good deal of scale to make it work, to make it effective. I'm kind of lost as to how this would benefit the city, considering our size. There would be much more investment needed in many different sectors to make this area of effluent large enough in order to power even a 15,000 square foot building. So can you just kind of explain a couple of those bullet points, because I was kind of lost in that, and this is going to require investment on the part of the city, which we need to scale up even just to meet these kind of minimum benefit guidelines.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yeah, the economy of scale is an important factor in the thermal energy recovery projects that we've looked at. All of the projects, the smallest project we looked at was a 2.6 MGD of flow, and that was for 2 buildings at a cost of about $14 million in 2014 dollars, or 2017 dollars, sorry. So it's hard, it's an expensive, capital intensive project, these thermal recoveries, and you need the flow in order to capture enough to make it pencil out, to make it economically feasible. And honestly, at 30 to 35 gallons of intermittent flow that the city is seeing right now, it would be difficult, in my opinion, to really come up with a project that would help support, the thermal heat augmentation to business. Now, that's not to say that sometime in the future, when the flows get to the point and we're seeing more thermal energy arriving at the plant and exiting the plant through the effluent, that it might not be more economical to do that. But now's the time to plan for those possibilities. Right now we've looking at building a new wastewater treatment facility up in Rogers on the Crow River. And we're actually looking at ways to set aside property, set aside our internal processes and mechanisms and piping, so that if the day ever does come where wastewater reuse does become an option, viable, we've already planned for it. And some of those investments will have already been made. So I think, in my opinion, I think right now, East Bethel isn't quite at the point where there's enough flow, wastewater flow, to really get enough energy to make that investment worthwhile. But someday it will be, and now's the time to really plan for those possibilities. Like, maybe it's a distribution pipe that the developer puts in along with the water main.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, what intrigued me a little bit about this discussion, having come from an HVAC background, is the whole concept. I think we're very familiar with the geothermal type of heat capture. And you're dealing generally with about 50-degree groundwater type of temperature. This is more in the 80 degree, as I understand. So it's you know, significantly warmer than groundwater. But you essentially have a heat producer, and it's kind of being squandered right now in terms of where that heat is going. So wanted to have them come in so we could talk a little bit about, you know, is there a possibility we could use that heat to attract businesses to come? For example, some businesses use, let's say that they change oil on vehicles, they'll use the waste oil to heat their shop with a waste oil burner. May not be the best in terms of what it's discharging, but they definitely use the warmth from that as a fuel to heat that. But similarly, then, how would this possibly be used as an economic development tool? I think one area, if I can switch out here, one area that there's, oh, this is not cooperating. One area that has been kind of on the forefront of everyone's mind a little bit is right in here. This is Osborne's property. He has commercial real estate down there that he's looking to develop, and then also in here is his property for housing potentially at some point. His goal was to develop the commercial first, to be able to then fund the residential, and I'm just kind of giving a large kind of swath of it there. But this is significantly, this is a lot shorter, maybe half a mile in terms of distance there. So can you start on a small scale type of a deal as opposed to bringing it all the way up to Sims, you know, a 3 mile and a significantly more expense? Can you start on a smaller scale for some of these projects? Maybe. I mean, that's a possibility. But again, the flow rate today is, I think, arguably not the flow rate of tomorrow, given the fact that we're actively pursuing, you know, hookups for whether it's a school or the industrial park, or there's going to be 250 homes coming on with Capstone, you know, that'll be contributing as well. So as time goes on, we'll be, I think, development's somewhat been a little difficult given the fact that, you know, the marketplace hasn't really been supportive of it. But we're looking at, you know, I draw on the experience of Highway 10. We invested $300 million into Highway 10, and before it's even done, you'd be surprised the amount of development that's already coming, because they're trying to catch the wave ahead of the completion of that highway. And very similarly on Highway 65, you have $100-some million was granted by the legislature 2 sessions ago, and there'll be work going on the Blaine area, which is largely developed already, moving then up into Ham Lake, which is not necessarily supportive of high-density development. So in a way, it'll somewhat leapfrog to East Bethel, which is next in line. And I think we'll be seeing significantly more pressure for development as a result of that. As highways flow more freely, development follows. They can get their goods and services to market easier, and employees and everything to work faster. And that's an incentive for them. So yeah, the flow rate I think is not impressive today, but certainly will be something that everyone's working on, trying to get to a higher rate that's going to, and that was part of the discussion with the Met Council, is how can we work together here to, you know, we have a bill that we're supporting for $10.5 million. They have a project they're possibly looking at doing. How can we work together here to get this across a bonding bill at the legislature and start facilitating some of this development, which will help the flow rate, help the efficiency of the plant, and everybody, help the tax base, help the you know, the jobs in the community and everything else. I think it's a win-win-win for everyone in that regard. So again, it's really kind of you know, as Kyle indicated, kind of thinking outside that box right now, because once everything's developed out, trying to tear it all up and do this later is cost prohibitive. I mean, you just can't do that, right? So, and the cost is high now too. I mean, I don't wanna,
Sure.
I don't wanna say that 30 million is inexpensive, but perhaps, there's you know, some more cost-effective ways of doing it, and that would be, I think part of what, the administrator for the Met Council was kind of thinking in terms of how can we kind of do some study and some planning on this and figure out, what would make sense if we were to implement something like that and use it as an economic tool. If we could say, you know, Mr. Businessman coming in with, you know, a large facility that's going to bring 100 jobs, we'll supply you a line of heat to your facility and help reduce your overall cost, your capital or your operational cost to heat that facility. I think they'd probably line up for that. They'd be
Well,
interested in
and
that.
Especially companies that are looking more and more towards sustainability efforts, and that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask one super basic question too? So say we're going up to Sims, you've got a pipe. Is there heat loss as the further away you go?
Yeah, the further that it travels, yes, you do lose some thermal energy through that. However,
Okay.
the pipe is buried below the frost line, so it's never really susceptible to freezing.
Okay.
But the further you go away from the source, the lower that temperature in that pipe does drop.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jen Kostrowski. I also
Hi.
have the honor of working with Kyle at the Metropolitan Council. I wanted to be clear because sometimes these things get muddled, that we're talking about two different components that are complementary. So there is the district energy system loop that connects to industry, and there's the energy source. In this case, we were talking about the East Bethel wastewater treatment plant. John and I spent a trip to Denmark in this last fall because the Danes are actually world leaders in thinking about using district energy and district heating systems for their residential all the way through industry. So if you go to Denmark, and I am now apparently becoming an advocate for people to go, it's an amazing country. You can see that as they are building developments, they are making sure the first thing they think about working with their developers is to ensure that a district energy loop is put in place. The one thing that I learned, because I also was just getting wrapped around how can we attach our treatment plant effluent heat recovery to these systems, and one of our hosts in Denmark told me, if you are doing the district energy heating loop right, you don't ever really think about what the energy source is. You try to make it agnostic to energy sources. So for instance, currently right now, district energy in downtown St. Paul is powered by a biofuel incinerator. It's powered by a natural gas incinerator. And at times they also try to augment with, thinking about outside of the box, additional energy sources. They have a maintained level of energy that runs through their district energy, but they're using multiple sources of that energy to keep that system running. And so what I would challenge you to challenge us to work together on is that I don't know about the policies or where the council can help to offset the cost of the energy loop, but that's worth exploring because the loop itself is the investment that opens the door to bringing in new industry to your city. And so that's just something I want to make sure that we are talking about two different things. And yes, right now maybe wastewater effluent heat recovery isn't feasible, but it's that loop that's the important part to think about now.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Trying to see if I can find that.
Interesting.
Anyways.
Any other comments or thoughts? Thank you so much. That was really interesting and very educational. So we just keep this in mind going down the road, something to start thinking about as future development makes its way. And
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think we'll continue to work with the Met Council here on pursuing, the initial bond was for 10.5 million. I think the discussion was going to go to 15 million. 10.5 for the city project, and then 2 million for a reserve capacity loan, and then 2.5 million for possibly studying this, or, you know, whatever was in mind of you know, the next steps for trying to determine if this can be a reality for maybe here, maybe elsewhere, but at least from a study standpoint, what reality is. And so then, you know, that's kind of the road we were planning to go down, was to raise that to a $15 million ask, and then try and kill 3 birds with 1 stone, essentially. So. Yeah.
I guess my reaction is this is kind of, it looks like it's kind of a quasi-pilot project to a certain degree. And to be honest with you, I'm a real straight up person. I'm not sure I want to see the city sign on to a $10 million bond, and I don't have a vote on it for a pilot project. You know, and I have worked in some of your facilities at one point in time in my career in construction. I've seen them do some pretty amazing things. If you go down to Phoenix, Arizona, and you know where I'm going with this, you head west on I-10, and there's a nuclear plant out in the middle of the desert that they cool that reactor, that plant, with Effluent from the Valley of the Sun. But I look at the amount of money that's involved, and it's a fairly new technology. I mean, one of my questions would be, because again, I have worked in nukes, and condensers are nothing more than heat exchangers. And there's nothing worse, there's no worse job. I never really had to do it, but there's no worse job than going down inside the condensers at Monticello. And when they first open them up, I mean, it's just gross. And if you're putting a regional, a district heating plant in operation, you can't shut it off because you have to service your heat exchangers. You almost have to have 2 heat exchangers. You know, you have to build redundancy into your systems. It just seems like it's brand new stuff, so to speak, and it's interesting. I'm gonna enjoy watching it. I think, you know, I'm big on the idea of conservation and et cetera. But $10 million is pretty serious money for a city of the size of East Bethel. If the state wants to get involved, if the school district wanted to get involved because of benefit for the 2 schools over there, I think then you get more stakeholders in the game. But I don't have a vote.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to clarify, the $10.5 million bond is a state bond that would be going to the legislature and asking them for $10.5 million for the hooking the schools up to the city sewer and water, building a water tower, building the water treatment plant, and then stubbing that off so that it can feed the newly created industrial park. Okay, $2 million is a reserve capacity loan that we owe the Met Council at this point. They're interested in getting that money as soon as possible, so that would be included in this. But $2.5 million, the balance of the $15 million ask from the state, the 2.5 would be used for the study purposes and whatever, however best that could be spent to study that.
I don't have a problem with the study and
Yeah.
et cetera.
It's not the
forward.
city. It's not the city taking a bond out, though.
Okay,
Yeah,
That's-
just to
So
clarify
we're
that.
requesting that, yeah, this
Right.
new state bonding cycle.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of a failure to launch when we already have, $15 million outstanding of a $20 million bond to add another 10 to it. You know, I don't think there would be any votes for that, but,
Yeah,
you know, that's a pretty large debt service for a community this size.
The other thing is, from a pro forma standpoint, how many BTUs, I mean, looking at your maximum effluent flow, how many BTUs can you extract? And I'm not a mechanical tradesman. I was a superintendent carpenter. But I know that, you know, it takes so many BTUs and someone runs the calculations on what a building eats, for lack of a better term. And it just doesn't, it seems like you need a lot of water going on.
Yeah, you are testing my memory, but we're gonna try and do this together. I was the project manager for the project that was looking to partner with District Energy in St. Paul that Kyle alluded to. We discharge 210 million gallons at
About
180.
170.
Sorry. This is where, again, like my numbers, this is why Kyle's here, to keep me honest. So we discharge about 170 million gallons per day from the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant. That water year-round is around 60 to 70 degrees. And so, like, you know, Matt was alluding to the fact that it's that temperature difference between the air temp. So in the winter, there's a lot more bang for our buck in that effluent than in the summer. However, District Energy engineers and their counterpart consultants, Evergreen Energy, that was who was working with us on this project, said that our effluent from the Metro plant could cover the energy needs of all of District Energy's customer base, which was all of downtown St. Paul, Regions Hospital, and across the river. So that was all of the buildings in downtown St. Paul, including the Capitol complex. And so if we scale, again, that's 170. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the BTU conversion. But I think this is where, again, it's orders of scale of whether or not effluent is the right energy source for this loop now, or whether there's alternative energy sources. To your point of having redundancies, that was also addressed in the District Energy project. We were trying to have our wastewater flows run 24/7, 365. Luckily, everyone uses toilets all the time, so we have a consistent product to sell. However, we still knew we had to build in redundancies. So even though we would have been offsetting the need for natural gas for the District Energy Energy Creation Center, they still would have kept it on standby in case, for whatever reason, we had to shut down the heat recovery connection to our wastewater, whether it was for cleaning or any sort of maintenance. So there was an expectation of having some sort of built-in redundancies. The part that we were able to build off of from that project is that the city of St. Paul has had that district energy loop in place since the 80s. And so the technology has been proven. They also have moved from multiple power sources. And so it's where the heat exchangers and wastewater is a pretty new technology for the US. It also has been in place in Europe for quite some time. So it's not as new as we think. It's new to us, but it has been in practice in other countries. So I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's definitely an equation of flow
Yeah, and
to,
we're at
to
35
heat, to
now, right?
BTUs,
Okay.
to, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So again, I think all that study work that needs to be done, generally, would be contracting with, some firm to do that, and that would be, probably where some of the cost is associated, and then you would know when it's efficient, at what rate, and that sort of thing. And again, it's not that we necessarily would hook the entire city up, it's that we'd pick, that low-hanging fruit of this area could develop with this, or that area could develop with it too, and then try and use that as a catalyst for businesses to say, working with Minnesota Partnership, or I forget the name of the business partnership, and say, hey, this would be a benefit to potential people that want to relocate into our state. Here's an area to consider. And kind of those site selectors are always looking for some reason,
Right.
you know, to stand above, you know, someone else, and, you know, of course, it's all bottom line for them. And any sort of energy savings, they're gonna be able to translate that into 20 years of, you know, run a calculation on that pretty easily. But at any rate, it's just, it's an idea that I think we, you know, can consider potentially. And if we're successful at the legislature, we may be able to head down this road and see if it's something that benefits us.
Interesting. Thank you. Thanks for all the information. Any last questions or comments? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Then we can move on to item number 5, City Council report.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Well, City Council is kind of getting to a point of wrapping things up here for this year. We, you know, one of the topics of discussion I think we want to go into for the next year is kind of setting a list of priorities,
Yes.
EDA priorities. So we had a gentleman who was running for council came in, and it just, you know, during the approval of the budget, kind of wondering, you know, how the budget gets spent for EDA, and somewhat, I think they discussed the last time, kind of transfers the majority of it to staff for staff time. But there is some dollars left over, and he had indicated there were businesses that he spoke to that were having challenges. And I think we did a business study that a lot of the challenges had to do with, you know, workforce and things that the city can't really aid necessarily on. You know, if it has to do with taxes, tax abatement isn't something the county is very favorable on, although their first one was in Blaine here not too long ago. First one ever, I believe. And so trying to understand somewhat, you know, is it the city code that's restricting them? Is it, you know, do there need to be changes to ordinances to allow more flexibility? Trying to understand some of that, I think, is what we're hoping to get to the bottom of as possibly a priority. But then also there's city-owned land, and what should that land, how should we dispose of that land? Try and get it back on a tax base? Do you try and reach out to potential businesses that could possibly locate there? And then there's the discussion of, you know, does the city take a more proactive approach to buying parcels that they know are going to be key to development along that corridor? Say there's a corner lot that's beautiful that you could, you know, purchase, clean up, and sell it to an Aldi type of a project that would come in, you know, just kind of brainstorming. Are there those type of opportunities? And I think that's a bigger discussion that maybe the EDA can have at some point, and try and chart a course for next year in terms of determining what would be best for the EDA to work on and focus on, and the best return on investment for this committee, for the city. So.
Agreed. I'd love to set some goals and priorities with everyone's input. Yeah, that's great.
With those surveys that you have been doing with businesses, I know when we last met, we were talking about that, and you mentioned that you have received some responses. Is that some information that we'll be able to see and kind of, so we can guide our own discussions on how to set priorities?
I believe, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I believe we've gone over that study already. We can certainly bring it back by way of a refresher too. You know, part of the challenge is not everyone usually responds to that, and if you get
Right.
You know, 10%.
You're referring to the business recruitment and retention survey, which is, what, 8 years old, 7?
No,
we
just
had
the
one.
recent, we'd had a recent survey.
Yeah.
Which one are you
the
referring
The
to?
city staff decided to do, instead of
Oh,
investing
that
in
one,
the big
okay,
expensive
yeah.
one, we're gonna do something more locally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm trying to recall back on what some of those challenges were. I'm not sure that they were something the city can impact. You know, if you can't find people to fill jobs, it's
To the extent it's related to internet access, that ought to be improving.
That was a huge one.
That was,
That was,
it
that was a huge one. The businesses that were the most affected by that, and I was very involved with those surveys. The businesses that were the most affected by that had gone out and they had straightened their internet access out by either running I can't think of the term that, wasn't fiber optic, but they.
T1 or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, they had ran their own line back to a node and things along those lines, or they had a microwave setup.
Starlink or something, yep.
Yeah, yes, I mean, we looked at a number of different things, and back when we did that survey, that business retention and expansion project, Starlink wasn't around back then.
Right.
That was,
Wasn't even a gleam in Elon's eye.
yeah, Elon Musk wasn't making electric cars, but it was, I think that the internet access has been put to bed in my mind insofar as along the Highway 65 corridor. I mean, if someone is trying to locate a high-tech engineering firm down on the west or the east side of the city, there might be a problem then unless Midco wants to help them out, but it, I think the biggest thing we did was we were able to educate some of the businesses. The structural steel manufacturer in town or fabricator, I guess you don't manufacture it, you fabricate it, and that is something that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse. He told me that he had a problem finding qualified help and put him in touch with the Anoka County Tech School. I'm assuming that things worked out for him.
You're talking about Paul?
No,
Aggressive?
not Paul Johnson, no.
I think the other thing was to advertise East Bethel consciously, deliberately as a business destination, too, to project that image for us.
I mean, I look
Not
at,
just a
Right.
bedroom community, but we're business oriented.
I look at all the trade shows that Julie has gone to. That's what we're doing there.
Yeah,
You know.
Anoka County was there at the MinCar Expo. There were a lot of other individual cities, maybe next year we send a representative to talk to the brokers. I think, the sort of bigger things that reach developers, brokers, et cetera. I think there's a lot of issues, and I know we went round and round on the cost and how we're going to execute this, but that's a big number one goal for me, is to try to figure out how to it's a communication tool, and it's talking to our businesses and figuring out how we can help. I mean, we did it 8 years ago, we improved a lot of things, but there's new issues, and there's new businesses. There's a lot that wasn't in place back then, so I think
the highway improvements, and you brought that up. I think the highway improvements are a huge advantage for us.
right.
And as they speed up the traffic flow as they move forward with the rest of the Highway 65 plan, I mean, if you're sending a truck down the highway to deliver something or bring a crew somewhere, and they're sitting at a stoplight down in Ham Lake, they're not making any money down there then. So, for the company, they're making money. But windshield time doesn't help the business's bottom line.
No, but agreed. I'd love to set a list of priorities.
Okay.
Look forward to that.
The other thing I'll comment on is that the levy was approved here in December. They started off with about a 3%, but now that's sub 3, so 2.9. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you recall, 2.95, I think, was what they landed on.
2.94 to be exact.
2.94. And that's the 5th lowest city in the county.
That's great.
Out of 21 cities.
Right, so
Excellent.
when you talk about prospective businesses looking to locate somewhere where taxes are reasonable,
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I always tell the story. I had a friend who was in the he made cabinetry or whatever, and he had, I'm just going to use rough numbers, he had a 6,000 square foot facility, and he had a friend that was located in Hennepin County that had a 3,000 square foot facility, did the same thing. And the Hennepin County 3,000 square foot facility was twice the taxes of the 6,000 square foot facility in Anoka County. And so when businesses see this and they think, man, we need to grow and taxes are going to be obscene somewhere else, they consider then moving to Anoka County. And Anoka County was the second fastest growing county in the state. So I think as cities, some are higher taxed than others, obviously, but as cities are more reasonable in their taxes, that will be certainly an attractant for businesses to come in. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I'll comment on is on the 23rd here, we're going to the planning is going to be dealing with this tomorrow, and that's going to come to the council on the 23rd. And this is the cannabis ordinance that cities are being forced to get on the books right away before licenses are given out. That's going to be new businesses in town, whether you like that topic or not. It's going to be it's not something you can deny. It's something you can control. And so that's what this ordinance is going to be dealing with, is where can you put it, how close to schools, how close to daycares, how many can there be, how large a sign, that sort of thing. A lot of trying to get our arms around some of that undefined area right now, and there's smells and everything else that go with it that they're trying to control. So that'll be coming forward, and then you'll probably see some businesses popping up, selling that product.
Has
I
the
don't
city
thi-
received any inquiries about starting those businesses?
Yes. Yeah. Generally, it's people that are already selling edibles, or they're selling, they're in the tobacco business or something like that. They have a natural, segue into that. And all cities are struggling right now because the state was supposed to come out with rules on that, and they didn't. And yet, and it was kind of, it's a great idea, let's do it. And everyone's kind of left going, wait a minute, there's no rules, the law enforcement has problems. I mean, there's just issues with this that was not well thought through, in my opinion. But anyways, we're trying to get our arms around that before the horse is out of the barn, shall we say. So anyways, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, unless you have anything else you want to add?
I'm good.
Okay. I think that's all we have.
Well, before we adjourn, I'd like to thank Mayor Lewis. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks for your contributions
Okay.
to the EDA. Yeah, we've appreciated it. Good luck.
Well, it's been very interesting to work with you guys too.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.
And Madam Chair, if I can just indicate, you have a timesheet at your desks there that will need to be signed. From what I understand, some people deny taking payment.
Yeah.
So that's an option for you, but for those that want compensation, you just need to sign that, and we'll submit it for payment. And that pretty much takes care of the responsibilities for the year.
Great, thank you.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that with a Merry Christmas to everybody.
There you go.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Excellent.